about crumbled dust.
It's a wood background.
Oh, I can see the grain.
There you go.
Okay, so our article was from So a little overview. So in 2001, several dead porpoises were found on the shore of Vancouver Island in Canada, and their cause of death was yeast inside their lungs. Around the same time, dogs and cats were found to have shortness of breath, and then humans started experiencing the same symptoms, and it was all caused by Cryptococcus gattii, which is an airborne yeast that infects animals and humans, those that are sick and healthy. So the outbreak started in 2001, and from 2001 to 2012, 337 British Columbians were reported infected. Of those, 50% of them had already had like a weak immune system from prescribed drug illnesses. And then 10% had minor sicknesses, but 20% were healthy before they were infected. And the scientists said it's fairly high mortality for environmentally acquired fungus. So this fungus it's the first outbreak caused by a fungus that evolved into an extremely infectious disease. And it was also the first to cause an outbreak in a place where the organism was unknown. And statistically, like out of 100 people infected, 25 to 30 people died. And then this picture just shows like where it originated in Vancouver Island, and then it spread it to like the U.S. So its origins. A disease investigator, Murray Fife, she took several approaches to try and localize the disease, the fungus, but she was unsuccessful until a group that recently visited Trevor Beach Provincial Park were reported to have been infected. And in 2002, they discovered that the fungus was located inside their native Douglas fir trees. So they took 57 samples from 24 different trees, and by the end of that summer in 2002, the fungus had spread to the air, to the soil, and to various trees in the area. And that's just a picture of the fungus. So C. gattii has previously infected people in other places, but there has never been an outbreak like this. So like the picture showed, like it's spread to like various places, like all over. But with research, they found that it can survive in fresh water, salt water, air, and the mud on your shoes. So like even if you had mud on your shoes for like years, it would still be alive. And then it preferred to live in warm winters, low elevation, and dry conditions.
So basically, this is just kind of a picture showing visually how the fungus infects people. So the first part, this area here, Seung-Jae fungus prefers to live on certain trees in the soil around them. It consumes decaying matter, and then the habitats on Vancouver Island include the fir trees, like she had said, so pretty much everywhere in the area is like underdeveloped, it lives. See right here, the fungus infects people by entering their airways, either as microscopic dehydrated yeast cells or as spores, which are smaller, harder units, just so it can disperse. And then these bodies then lodge in the air sacs deep in the lungs, and they can eventually collect and start to grow thick membranes and even form nodules, which is what at first scientists were confused about, because when the porpoises washed up on shore, they found nodules in the lungs, and they at first thought that it was perhaps maybe cancer, especially in humans, but then they found that it happened to be this yeast, this fungus. So the colonization of the nodules in the lungs can cause coughing, breathing problems, nausea, and fever. And then some of them may make their way into the bloodstream by hitchhiking on macrophages. Some yeast cells even manage to cross into the bloodstream and go directly into the brain. And then most often, brain infections are fatal. So the types of fungus that emerged, there are 3 molecular subtypes: VG2A, VG2B, VG2C. Those are the DNA sequences of the fungus. And in 1971, a man was showed to have an infection of VG2A. So from that, people assumed that VG2A, the first subtype, had been in the area for at least 40 years. VG2B, however, is indistinguishable from the same type of fungus found in Australia, where it was like originally from, and the only place they could find it besides now Vancouver Island, and is possibly where it originated from. And the VG2C has appeared in 2005 in Oregon, but they're not sure where it originated from. If it's just like obviously another subtype that could be like siblings. It could be just like the result of a mating between VG2A and VG2B, but they're not completely sure. So what at first too, what they thought was there's also another type of fungus located in Vancouver Island known as Cryptococcus neoformans, and they've had cases of people being affected with the same fungus, but it never had this much like of an effect on animals or humans and stuff like that. And so also Cryptococcus neoformans was more likely to infect immunocompromised patients, so like patients with AIDS or where their immune system's already affected and it's like down basically. When Cryptococcus gattii infects healthy, immunocompetent humans or animals. So VG2A and VG2C are considered to be the two most virulent forms, and what they were looking at, was even though they considered it to be only in one place for 40 years, they assumed at first it's been there probably for longer because as fungus has remained in one area, it tends to diversify genetically, which is why they thought, which is why they're finding 3 different molecular subtypes. And then what they also thought, but then what they figured out was the fungus may have actually mated because as a result of mating, mutations occur, which is probably the reason why neoformans isn't as virulent as C. gattii, because C. gattii is a mutation of the original fungus. So, to cause the virus to thrive, what they originally thought was, was brought over by someone or some animal or plant or something that happened to arrive there, probably the man in 1971 that originally brought it there perhaps. But it was actually struggling because since it's a subtropical or tropical fungus, it can't survive in the cold and harsh winters in Canada. But in the last 40 years, the temperatures in Vancouver have increased by maybe 1 to 2 degrees of Celsius. And so that probably caused the fungus to continue thriving and then reproduce. And then it was probably dormant in many of the soil or fir trees that were around Vancouver Island, but after economic developments of deforestation or building of highways and subdivisions caused the fungus to be released. Also, an increase in international trade probably caused more of the fungus to be brought over and allow it to, because fungus are very enthusiastic sexual beings, and because of that, I know it sounds weird, but because of that, they reproduce quickly and make, obviously, mutations and make more genetic variations. For example, if, because of trade, a fungus was brought from, that was often foreign to Canada, and then mates with a common fungus there, then that could perhaps create a more virulent form like the 3 molecular subtypes I've been showing up. So basically the only thing that we can really do is, now that the outbreak is spreading, there's not really much they can do besides monitoring, who's infected and early diagnosis basically. They also can have an increase in plant-animal biosecurity, so, increasing security in customs or, better supervision over even perhaps cleanliness, like in an airport, someone happens to walk in with some mud on their shoes, have them clean it off so that fungus doesn't happen to cross over. Also, they can invest more money in the development of new and improved antifungal drugs. And then we have a video of the actual news report talking about the outbreak of C. gattii in Vancouver.
You may want to drag it.
Open up. Really? Okay, it looks like we're not watching the video because it must have just been removed.
Oh.
Yeah,
Quiet.
the second time this has happened to me. It happened to me last year in English too. So,
Why always try so much as
Pirated video.
so any questions?
Did the article talk at all about like what sorts of like drugs are being worked on for the thing, or was it
Just like antifungal drugs that are just
okay?
kind of basic. They haven't. That's why they need more money to invest in more research,
Yeah.
and so that's why really the only thing they can really do is, monitor it, monitor where the outbreak is going, and just early diagnosis of patients, of anyone that might be infected, and just try and control it, and maybe isolate them, quarantine them.
Yeah.
um,
What's
that-
the infection rate about? Like, did it have like stats about like how often people are being infected? Or?
It did. Right there. It said it right here. So, data collected between 02 and 06 showed that on Vancouver Island, 27.9 cases per million in the population, which is 3 times higher than the fungus that was found in Australia.
Okay.
You guys said that like it, like dolphin had it too, right? So like it could survive in the ocean.
Yeah, it can like
Freshwater, saltwater. just
basically that's why it's so virulent, is because it can survive pretty much anywhere, even on inanimate objects. So maybe on your car, and you could
transport it,
yeah.
wherever you go.
Thank you.
Sweet.